I love Jurassic Park. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. For those of you who don't know, my name is Faith, and thank you so much for watching. It is officially the last Sunday of the month, so we will be continuing our book to film adaptation series. And this month, we're talking about my favorite book of all time and my favorite movie of all time, Jurassic Park. There are just a couple things that I need to preface before we get into it. First, this video will contain spoilers. If you haven't read the book and watched the movie, you will be spoiled by things that happen in one or the other. And while some of those spoilers are minor, others are pretty big, like character deaths. I'm not going to say who just yet, but there are characters who die in the book who live in the movie and characters who die in the movie but live in the book. And I will be mentioning who those characters are towards the end of this video. I will go ahead and put timestamps in the description, but only for when I talk about the character deaths. There are so many differences between the book and the movie. I simply cannot touch on all of them without sitting here and talking for about 50 hours. So that being said, I'm really only going to focus on the major differences. And there's still a ton of major differences, so I might not get to all of them. But if you're still curious about any differences between the book and the movie at the end of this video, feel free to ask for a part 2. I'd be more than happy to do one. While there are similarities between the book and the movie as well, I will be mainly focusing on the differences. And lastly, I'm going to do my best to talk about everything in timeline order, but no promises. There might be a couple times where I mix some things up. So without further ado, let's talk about Jurassic Park. So the first 30 pages of this book are just not in the movie at all. I literally don't think even a single sentence of those first 30 pages make it into the movie. The first 30 pages are about how dinosaurs have made it to the mainland and they're biting people, and these people are going to the doctors with mysterious animal bites. But obviously dinosaurs went extinct, so no one's gonna be like, oh, you're getting bit by a dinosaur, dude. They just think it's some lizard. And as much as I wish that storyline was included in the movie is already over 2 hours long, and I can understand that adding that would have added a lot of time to the movie if they wanted to give it the attention and time that it deserved. After the first 30 pages of the book, we're introduced to Alan and Ellie, and in the movie there's a romantic subplot between the two, and although nothing ever really comes about it in the first movie, it is heavily implied that they like each other. But that is not a thing at all in the books. In fact, there is literally zero romantic anything between the two. It's mentioned that Grant is actually a widow and Ellie is his student. You are told that she is his student long before you ever realize there will be no romantic subplot between the two. So I'm gonna be honest, for a little bit I was kind of concerned that there would be some professor-student relationship going on, and I know some people like to read about that, and that's fine, but I am actually relieved that that was not the case in the book. Real quick, while we're on the topic about Grant, one of his main character traits in the movie is that he hates kids, but in the book he loves kids. As you probably know, he spends the majority of the book and the movie with Lexi and Tim. I honestly don't know why that was changed in the movie. I'm assuming it was just to add extra tension and drama, but how much more of that do you need when you're on the run from dinosaurs? That being said, in the movie, he did warm up to the children fairly quickly in my opinion. While he wasn't ecstatic about it, he seemed to do fine with them. And speaking of the kids, Lex and Tim, their roles are completely swapped in the book. In the book, Tim is older than Lexi, while in the movie, Lexi is older than Tim. I looked up why that was, and it was kind of 50-50 on the reason. 50% were like, Steven Spielberg has never said why the change occurred, and the other 50% said that it was because Steven Spielberg wanted the actor who played Tim to play Tim. And I guess because of how young he was, they decided to cast an older Lexi. Their ages weren't the only thing that changed though. In the book, Tim was the computer genius and Lexi was obsessed with baseball. She was always wanting to play catch with her ball and glove. But in the movie, Lex was the computer genius. But they didn't give her trait of liking baseball to Tim. Tim was still very much a dinosaur nerd in both the movie and the book. Honestly, the majority of characters had different personality traits in the books than in the movie. For example, Gennaro, the lawyer, I loved him in the book. In the book, there's a character named Ed Regis, and he is a, for lack of a better word, piece of crap. And in the movie, Gennaro didn't have his book personality, he had Ed Regis's book personality. So basically the character of Gennaro in the movie was the character Ed Regis in the book. I hope that made sense. Along with their differences, I felt Wu was pretty different. For one, his role was a lot bigger in the book than in the movie. I feel like the Wu we see in the book is the Wu that we see in the Jurassic World reboots, but not the Jurassic Park movie. If I remember correctly, and if I'm not, please correct me in the comments, the way Hammond presented Wu with the opportunity was like, dude, if you do this, you're going to be the most famous scientist that has ever lived. And Wu, who is either fresh out of grad school or still in grad school, loved the idea of that, and that is kind of why he signed on to do it. So in the book, he was kind of like, oh, I want to be better than everyone else. I am better than everyone else. But in the movie, we literally get one scene of him. Personally, I didn't feel that way about him in the movie. I loved him in the movie. I thought he was cute. And all you really get from him is that he's a scientist at the park and he's doing his job. But in the book, we go a lot deeper into his character, and in the book, he does have the I want to be better than everybody else mentality. At least that's how I felt about it. John Hammond is also extremely different in the book. I hate him in the book. Don't get me wrong, I don't really like his character in the movie either, but I feel like the bad traits he had in the movie were multiplied times 1,000 in the book. I absolutely hated Hammond in the book, and I see a lot of people actually say he's not that bad. I fully disagree. I think he's terrible. While his character definitely isn't the best in the movie, I really do think he's just a terrible person in the book. In both the book and the movie, you have multiple characters, for example, Alan, Ellie, and Ian, telling Hammond how wrong he is and how he should stop doing what he's doing. While in both the book and the movie, he kind of just brushes their points aside and refuses to admit that he's wrong. In the movie, it more so feels like he just doesn't understand their points and that he doesn't understand fully why it's wrong. But in the book, it kind of seems like he does understand their points, but he just brushes them aside for his own gain. Ellie's character wasn't as different as the others, but I do still feel like it was different from the book and the movie. Like I said earlier, in the book, Ellie is a student, but in the movie, she is a complete professional. In the movie, she's very confident, she knows what she's talking about, and honestly, she's one of my favorite female characters of all time. But in the book, there are definitely times where it comes across that she isn't so sure of herself. Also, her role in the book is significantly smaller than it is in the movie. The characters I felt that really didn't change that much from book to movie were Ian Malcolm, Malden, and Nedry. Obviously, there were some minor changes, but I feel like those changes were necessary and made sense from book to movie. So shifting away from the characters and back to the plot, this isn't really a major difference, but it kind of just stuck out to me. One of the most iconic scenes in the movie is when they come across the sick Triceratops, but in the book, it's not a Triceratops, it's a Stegosaurus. And that's another one where I've seen a few different reasons as to why that change was. One of the things I think I read about it was that Steven Spielberg just liked Triceratops more than Stegosaurus. And I think another reason I saw was that it was cheaper and easier to build a Triceratops animatronic than it was a Stegosaurus animatronic. As I said earlier, there might be some times where I mess up the timeline, and I think this is one of those times. I think there were a couple other points that I'm going to talk about that happened between the sick Stegosaurus and this next point, but honestly, I don't fully remember, so I'm just gonna mention it now. They spotted velociraptors getting on the boat that was going back to the mainland. And by they, I mean Grant, and I think a couple other people saw it as well. And that was a huge plot point in the book that was just, again, never mentioned at all in the movie. In the book, that is the reason that Grant, Lexi, and Tim were rushing to get back to Hammond and the others, because they needed to use a satellite phone or something to notify the boat that, hey, you can't dock, you have dinosaurs on board, and they can't get onto the mainland. Honestly, I did really like that storyline, and I really wish that that was included in the movie. We all know Rexy, right? She's a queen, she's an icon, but what you probably don't know if you didn't read the book and you only watched the movie, in the book, there are two T-Rexes. You have Queen Rexy, but then you also had a baby T-Rex. Sorry, I think it would have been considered like a teenager or something. So imagine not running from one T-Rex, but from two. That would be even more terrifying. Don't get me wrong, I would have loved to see two T-Rexes in the movie, especially one that wasn't an adult, but was older than the baby that we see in the Lost World movie. But I fully understand that building a second T-Rex animatronic would have been so unbelievably expensive. Shifting back to characters real quick, all my homies hate Dennis. We all know and hopefully hate Dennis Nedry. Before reading the book, one of the things that I had heard was that his death in the book was a lot more brutal and gruesome than it was in the movie. I do agree that it is more gruesome in the book. However, I don't think it's different enough to be like one of the main talking points that I hear about. Obviously, if Jurassic Park wasn't PG-13 and it was R-rated, we would get a lot more gruesome deaths like we do in the book. But Jurassic Park is still considered a family movie, so I can understand why it wasn't shown as explicitly as it was in the book. So again, while I honestly do agree that it is more gruesome in the book, I think that goes for pretty much every single death in the book, not just his, so I don't really understand why that is the one that I see people talking about the most. I'm just glad he died in both, honestly. And I know there's a ton that I'm about to skip over, and I apologize, but again, I am really trying just to stick to the major points. So we're gonna skip ahead to the river scene. And if you've only watched the movie, you're probably like, Faith, what's the river scene? I'll tell ya. Because for some reason, It's not in the movie. There is a similar scene in Jurassic World 3 at the end with the Spinosaurus. And they actually included a river scene in Jurassic World Rebirth. And while it's not exactly the same as it is in the book, honestly, it's pretty close. In this point in the book and the movie, Grant, Lex, and Tim are together trying to get back to where everybody else is. And they find a raft and they find a river. And they realize the river is flowing in the direction that they need to be going to get back to everybody. So they decide to put the raft in the river to float them down so that they can get there faster. But shortly after they get on the raft, they see the T-Rex in the distance asleep. I forget exactly how, but the T-Rex wakes up and spots the raft. And again, if you've seen Jurassic World Rebirth, this is pretty similar to what the scene is in the book. The T-Rex gets in the water, swims after them, and tries to tip them over. Now, I'm gonna be honest, I don't really remember why the T-Rex stopped chasing them, but it did. It is one of the more action-packed scenes in the book, and again, one of my favorite scenes in the book, so I do really wish that it made it into the movie, but I am glad that we saw a variation of it in Jurassic World Rebirth. Shortly after that, the river ends up taking them through the aviary, which again wasn't in Jurassic Park, but there is an aviary scene in Jurassic Park 3. So in the aviary, there are obviously pterodactyls that attack Grant and the kids, but fortunately they're able to get away. But that is just another scene that wasn't in the movie that I really wish was in the movie. Shortly after that, there's another scene that is similar to a scene from both The Lost World and Jurassic World. The T-Rex comes back and chases them to the waterfall, and they end up getting behind the waterfall, which is similar to the scene when the T-Rex attacks their camp in The Lost World and when the Indominus Rex chases the kids to the waterfall in Jurassic World. There is more to that scene in the book, but just because it wasn't in the movie, I'm not really going to touch more on it. It's just another scene that I really wish was in the movie. So eventually their little side quest wraps up and they end up back at the main lobby area. Kind of similar to the movie, by the time they get there, the raptors have already kind of taken over everything, as in they've infiltrated the building. But in the book, there are so many more of them, and they were trying to get into the building that had everybody else, like Hammond, Ellie, Malcolm, Wu, Molden, literally everybody. In the movie, I'm so sorry, I literally cannot remember his name, but Samuel Jackson's character, we all know he goes to try to turn the power on and he dies. That happens in the book as well. But when he doesn't come back in the movie, Ellie and Molden are the ones who go out and try to turn it back on. But in the book, it's actually Gennaro who goes out there. And I'm sorry because I forget exactly why, but Grant also goes in after him. I'm pretty sure it's because the power still wasn't on. After Grant goes to get the power turned back on, he actually kills the raptors. Not all of them, obviously. In the book, there are so many. In the movie, we all know the insanely iconic scene of the T-Rex coming in and kind of dealing with the raptors while the people all get out. But in the book, Grant is actually the one that kills all the raptors. And he does this by injecting eggs in the lab with poison and then kind of rolling them across the floor so that they eat them and then they're poisoned and they die. And don't get me wrong, I love the scene in the movie where the banner falls as the T-Rex roars, but I did think that in the book that scene was really cool. So now we're pretty much at the end of the book, and the end is so different from the movie. The movie pretty much ends right after that iconic roar scene. It's pretty much just that, a quick little joke about how Hammond doesn't endorse the park, and then they're on the helicopter and they're gone. But there's actually quite a bit more that happens in the book. Guys, I'm gonna cry. I am flipping through my book to fact check myself, and look at this. Do you know what that is? That's a silverfish. That's a silverfish. That is a silverfish in my copy of Jurassic Park. I hate bugs. I hate bugs and I hate silverfish. Okay. Moving on. So after Alan kills the raptors, some of the others, including Grant and Ellie, go on a side quest to count how many raptors are actually in the park. And they find this little cave/tunnel system underground. And they try and count the raptors, but while they're doing that, all the raptors run out. And so they go into the tunnel with them to follow them. And they end up at this beach. And while they're at this beach, the military shows up. At least I'm pretty sure it was the military. And rescues them. And right after they're rescued, they bomb the entire island. All the dinosaurs are dead. That's it. That is literally it. So the ending, again, extremely different from the movie. And I'm gonna be honest, I like both endings and I think they suit their stories well. For example, if the book had the ending that the movie did, I feel it wouldn't have made sense. I feel it would have felt significantly incomplete. I think if the movie had the ending that the book did, it would have felt very out of the blue compared to the tone of the rest of the movie. So again, I think they both ended the story that they told very well. Because while yes, they're both the same story, there were so many changes that at the end, honestly, the story was pretty different in both. So that's the ending. And I actually filmed this at a terrible time because I'm kind of on a time crunch right now. So I have to finish filming within the next like 10 minutes, so I'm so sorry that the next part is gonna be kind of rushed. This is where I spoil character deaths. Go to this timestamp to skip past that. One of the most iconic Jurassic franchise deaths is when Gennaro gets eaten by the T-Rex while he's on the toilet. Gennaro lives, does not die. And like I said earlier, I loved his character in the book, so I was very glad that he lived. I hated him in the movie, so I was very glad that he died there. Another character who died in the movie that lived in the book, Malden. And this is another one that I think suited each story well. His death in the movie made sense. Him living in the book made sense. Now we have characters that died in the book that lived in the movie. Wu. As we know, Wu was featured in 2 of the Jurassic World movies, but he literally dies in Jurassic Park. And I was very surprised because, like I just said, he's in 2 of the Jurassic World movies. And even though I didn't really like his character in the book, I still thought his death was very sad. It was very, very gruesome as well. He gets gutted by a raptor. Brutal, guys. Absolutely brutal. And another one is John Hammond. John Hammond died in the book, and it was incredible. Even though I said earlier I don't really mind his character in the movie, I do kind of wish that he died in the movie. But that kind of would have been too much for the movie just because his grandkids were there. In the book, he was killed by a bunch of pro-Campsognathus, and it was incredible. He died by his own creation. Dare I say, he deserved it. Unfortunately, John Hammond's death was actually spoiled to me before I read the book, so I did know it was coming, which kind of sucked, but yeah. But then we have a death that genuinely shocked me so freaking much. Ian Malcolm. He gets attacked by that T-Rex at the beginning, and he pretty much never comes back from it. He succumbed to his injuries. I was very upset about his death, actually. I kind of wish he lived. I do like him more in the movie just because Jeff Goldblum, like, come on. But I still liked him in the book, and honestly, I do wish he lived. I still haven't read Lost World, but I'm assuming it's still about Ian Malcolm, so I'm really confused how they're gonna do that since he's dead. I'm pretty sure they just resurrect him or something, I don't know. But I'm very curious. Like I just said, I still haven't read Lost World, so please do not spoil the book for me in the comments. I am giving a rating to all the books that I do in this series, and while I give both the book and the movie an 11 out of 10, this rating is only about how accurate the film is to the book. Even though it is my favorite movie and my favorite book, I have to be honest about this rating. I'm giving it a 1.5 out of 5. Like I've mentioned, I only touched on the major points in this video. There are literally so many differences in the book and the movie. So while the theme and the lesson of the book and movie are pretty much the same, so much of it is different. Again, still my favorite book, still my favorite movie, but comparing the two, honestly, it isn't that good of an adaptation. Again, that is strictly focusing on how accurate the movie is to the book. So the more changes, the lower the rating, the less changes, the higher the rating. That is pretty much it. I'm sorry that I had to kind of rush at the end, but this was the only time that I had to film this video. If anything I said was inaccurate, please correct me in the comments, and feel free to share any differences that you noticed between the two. But again, I haven't read The Lost World, so please do not spoil that for me. Like I said, this is a series, so next month I'm going to compare another book to film adaptation, but I don't have one picked out yet, so if you have a request, please feel free to leave one. I can't promise that it will be done next month, but at some point I will get to it. So I think that is all that I have for you guys today. I know that there is so much that I didn't cover for the last half of the story, but again, there is just way too much to talk about, so if you would like a part 2, let me know and I would gladly do one, but I do think I hit a lot of the major differences. So I think that is all that I have for you guys today. Be sure to like and subscribe and follow my Instagram, which is in the description, for more bookish content. I hope you're all having a fantastic summer. Love you guys. Bye.